Now, coming to us all the way from Florida via Skype, I'd like to welcome Ms. Sahar Ullah, one of the founding members of, of Hijabi Monologues, and its main creative force. She was born and raised in South Florida, where I understand the mosquito is a state bird. She has a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Miami and a master's degree in Middle Eastern Studies from the University of Chicago. She then went to study at the American University in Cairo for 2 years, and I'm sure it is her love of words, the power of stories, and the spirituality of art in the oral tradition that inspires her creativity with the Hijabi Monologues. Here in the studio with me is Dan Morrison, the co-founder of the Hijabi Monologues and founder and executive director of 2 nonprofit organizations called, quote, One Well and Third Point. I hopefully will learn more about what those mean later on in the show. Please also let me welcome Rafia Jones, whose performance you have just seen. And she is a native Washingtonian. She's reaching back to her artistic roots to a place I remember, the DC Repertory Company. She is a mother, a grandmother, educator, entrepreneur, and is a founding member of the board of Entertainment Television, which produces this program. And finally, I'd like to welcome Camilla Pickett, who was born and raised in Detroit, grew up in Atlanta, now lives in DC for the past 6 years, and according to her, she had a very, quote, cool job and has gotten very cool degrees from very cool universities like Georgetown University's Law School. And when she grows up, Ms. Pickett says that she wants to become a revolutionary. So with that, we'll get started. Welcome.
Thank you.
So, Sahar, are you there?
I am.
So tell us, how did this band of people wind up getting together with something called Hijabi Monologues?
I'm not really sure. I think it takes a little bit of craziness.
Okay.
And commitment to the mission of the project. I met Dan at the University of Chicago. We were both students, master's students, in the Middle Eastern Studies program. Dan was 1 year my senior in the program.
Okay.
And we used to sit around and get together and talk. And at some point, we were, telling stories, a whole bunch of friends, Muslim girls, and Dan was there. And Dan said, we really need a Hijabi Monologues. And at the time, we just laughed. And Dan is a man of big ideas, and he's always going after those big ideas, and hence he has 2 NGOs. But at the time, I laughed it and I brushed it off. But then he wrote to me, and he wrote to Zinat Rahman, another co-founder, about the power of stories and how it changed him. And at the time, I thought about it, and they were my stories, so I know them, and they've affected me, but I didn't really realize how they could affect other people. I just tell them.
All right.
And I love to tell them.
These monologues that are talking about your experiences, and we've had a chance to see some of them. But how did you wind up putting it together to go from a conversation to this theatrical production, which has been now in a couple of different cities? Dan, if you would.
Yeah, no, I think it did start at this very organic level. And it started with friends getting together, sitting down in the quad at the University of Chicago. And, I would always say I always ask the dumb questions. But since we were friends, they could tell these stories. And so then we realized there was kind of this, this group of stories that, we really liked and that we thought were very, very powerful.
Okay.
Not only from, Sahar's standpoint of telling the story, but also having something people could relate to, that were, peoples of other faith and that weren't necessarily familiar with Islam or Muslims or anything. And so then what happened was we're like, let's do it. So Community Cafe in Chicago
Rami
Nani
Nashashibi, okay.
He's a wonderful human being and great guy.
So I gave you guys a home, a place to bring it together.
A venue in order to do it. And,
but these are more than just Sahar stories.
Yeah, no, they are, and I think Camilla actually has a story.
So how did you get
how did I get involved? I heard that they were coming to DC to do auditions. I actually got the email from like 8 different listservs, and I felt like I was being harassed to be involved. And it sounded like a good idea. I also believe in the power of storytelling. And I figured that...
That doesn't have anything to do with being a lawyer, does it?
Maybe. Possibly.
Okay.
But I figured that if I was going to be involved, then I should tell my own story. And so I sat down and wrote for like a half an hour, and that turned into the monologue that I auditioned with. And
all right, but the shape of this in Chicago, it took on one shape from the voices of women in Chicago, but I heard that not all of the women are necessarily Muslims. Do you have to be a Muslim to be in hijab?
Sahar, why don't you go ahead and take that one? It's a great question.
You don't have to be a Muslim to be a supporter or even participate in the Hijabi Monologues, and that's the great thing about the project. The stories themselves are stories of Muslim American women, but the thing about being a theatrical production, and maybe Dan could talk about being almost anti-theater, but the thing about performance is if you have the talent and you have the skill, and you have certain types of experiences that can make you connect with the character of the piece, then you can do it.
That's powerful. I'm gonna start. Rafia, how'd you get involved? You got the email?
Actually, yes. The power of the internet. My daughter-in-law actually sent me an email. She forwarded to me, and the interesting part for me is that I had just finished participating in another reading of stories, of letters actually, that women had sent to Michelle Obama about the whole presidential election and what it meant to them. And so, as you had mentioned earlier, my roots go back into theater, and I haven't done it in so long, and these two opportunities were just perfectly matched. They had some substance to it, and I felt that that was an opportunity for me to get back on stage and to just share with people. There's something magical that happens when you reach people and you connect, and so I did.
So I'm gonna take a short break with you. We have to come right back after a few minutes. I'm gonna go straight to Camilla Pickett's skit about 10 things. Don't go away. We'll be back, and then we'll have some closing thoughts with you after our next segment. Thank you.